I was recently asked by a friend how my 6-week checkup went with my OBGYN midwife team. And I told her that I actually didn't have a 6-week checkup. I went back to my OB and midwife at about 3.5 weeks for a check-in. Now, I had an unmedicated, low intervention, free of any complications of any sort birth, but I came back after only a few weeks thankfully, at her invitation, because I knew that I had just experienced a huge event in my body and in my life, and I wanted to make sure that my healing was going as it could, and possibly to make sure that if anything had gone wrong, that it didn't and it could be prevented. The timeline of my visit is way more in line with what the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, ACOG, recommend, which is a kind of more dynamic, coordinated approach with the practitioner that oversaw the birth, more frequent and sooner visits after the birth. Previously, the 6-week mark was the first time that a new mom was to see her provider after the birth, which to me just seems absolutely crazy if you think about how much can happen in that 6-week time. But luckily, in recent years, ACOG updated their recommendations, and now some of the more holistic and integrative providers are starting to catch on and doing whether phone call or text message check-ins in the initial days and weeks, followed by in-person visits way sooner than 6 weeks. Interestingly, a lot of us, I say us because expecting and new moms, have a lot of fear around childbirth. There's a lot of information out there about the risk of injury or even death during childbirth. However, majority of maternal deaths actually take place in the time period after the birth. So that first couple of weeks and months following the birth, actually, there's a lot of things that are happening, as I mentioned, in the body. And so to have some coordinated effort or communication with the care provider, in my opinion and experience, is absolutely essential. And here's the thing, the care provider isn't the only professional that I recommend for my clients or for any woman to see in the weeks after the birth. And today I wanted to share with you a couple of other invitations that you may consider in your own life. And this is, again, irrespective of whether you had a cesarean birth or vaginal birth, whether it was a very risky or a very kind of low trauma or quote unquote easy birth, it doesn't really matter. In the weeks after having a baby, you may find great benefit from connecting with a lactation consultant. And this is a trained professional who can help support any sort of elements of the breastfeeding or feeding relationship between the mother and the baby. And this is a really great thing to check in, even if there are absolutely no kind of complications or challenges, which is also quite rare in getting started with breastfeeding. Checking in between the 3 and 6 week period postpartum with a lactation consultant can be really helpful, because this is really when certain habits are being formed, such as the latch of the baby, the positioning that we're holding them in, which has a whole kind of impact on the entire structure of a woman's upper and lower body. But it's also a time where if you are not fortunate enough to live in a country with a very long maternal leave policy, you may already be thinking about going back into the workplace if you have a paid professional role. And so working with a lactation consultant is an excellent way to figure out what the best sort of way of feeding, way of connecting with the baby, for whether it's formula, pumping, breastfeeding on the chest feeding, etc., like what the best kind of setup is for you. And like I said, there are such simple but really important things that the lactation consultants can also provide, such as guidance on how to prevent mastitis, how to keep milk supply up if that's something that's becoming a concern, or how to regulate oversupply. There's tons of things beyond just the initial few days, and this is why after an initial rhythm has been established, but long-term foundation has not been set, seeing someone can be really helpful. The second is a pelvic floor physical therapist. Pelvic floor therapy is an absolute non-negotiable, no matter who you are, again, no matter how the birth went, because the stress and strain on the pelvic floor that took place over the course of the 40 or more or less week-long pregnancy is enormous. So seeing someone around the 6-week mark, or after a new mom has stopped her postpartum bleeding or lochia, this would be a great time to see someone, just to see the state of the pelvic floor, what muscles might need strengthening support or even relaxation. And it's not something that you can do yourself. It's not something you can do at home, not something you watch on YouTube. Having someone actually in a safe and professional way doing an internal exam, checking out the abdominal, lower and upper region, seeing the state of the diastasis recti or separation of the abdominal wall. These are all things that pelvic floor therapists can help with, and taking care of it early on can really help prevent any medium or longer term injury, as well as really support the healing that happened from the birth. Oh, and there is my son Lucas. The final person that I wanted to bring forward in terms of support that may be helpful in these early postpartum weeks is if you have any discomfort, upper or lower body, to see a holistic chiropractor or someone who has perinatal training or background. Whether it's from the discomfort that can come from being hunched over from breastfeeding or from sitting for long periods of time, or whether it's from lower back or pelvic girdle pain that's linked with the organs resorting themselves out and muscles and tissues healing from birth. Chiropractors can be really, really helpful in helping the body as it kind of rebuilds itself or kind of transforms in the postpartum time. And these are things that are, at least in the US, often not covered by insurance, and they're often not talked about. And so a lot of the moms that I work with who are months or even years into their postpartum are like, I wish I had known about this. So if you're currently pregnant or newly postpartum, you have the chance to get the support you need now and not to look back and wonder why you hadn't been informed. So I hope that that's helpful. And if you have any other providers or thoughts on people that have been helpful or supportive to you professionally as you've recovered or healed, please let me know. I'd love to be able to add to this video. And not in an overwhelming sort of way, because there's already so much to do as a new mom, don't get me wrong. But these are things that, can really help. So with that, I'm complete.